Hey guys, what's up? It's Finchinator. We're back with more Storm Zone and SSOU. That's right, the man, the myth, the legend, the god of innovation himself. We are back with yet another one of his games. This time around, Storm Zone's going to be facing Tala, who is a member of the OU Council and a really good player in the metagame as well. So this is like a highlight matchup for me. Two of these guys that have recently had great deals of success. Storm Zone, both on ladder and in tournaments, and Tala in tournaments himself. And I'm just mad pumped to see both these guys duke it out in the SSU metagame. We get some pretty fresh teams over here too. Storm Zone's team, without a doubt, is the more innovative of the two. Of course, he's got Aura Veil, and then he's got some interesting picks. So you don't always see Garchomp on these type of teams unless it's holding like, say, 3 attacks with weakness policy. But here it looks like it's probably just a dedicated stealth rocker, which normally you might see something like Landorus here, or even Mew. But here it's going with Garchomp, which actually makes a lot of sense. It's low on fire resist and does well against heat trance. That's cool. We also see Scizor, which is a bit of a blast from the past on both teams. Now, Scizor in Hyper Offense was used a bit more during the OLT metagame, the DLC 1 metagame, and that was all fine and well. But lately we've seen a bit less Rillaboom and other Pokemon that it takes advantage of. But now we're seeing it up to Concurum. We're seeing more Rillaboom again after the bans and so on and so forth. So Scizor has kind of found its way back into the metagame, and you might note that Tala has also noticed this himself, which in my opinion is pretty cool. I think it's great that we're seeing Scizor, a different steel type than say Corviknight or Heatran or Magearna, which is now banned, or Excadrill, being used. I think it kind of gives some different variation to the team archetypes we see, and I think that'll open up us to a ton of new possibilities. So I'm pumped, but perhaps to start to show the Pokemon I'm most interested in seeing on Storm Zone's team is Galarian Slowking. Now, we saw Slowbro-Galar on Hyper Offense teams in DLC 1 with the Quick Draw set, the set that ends lives and ends careers when it gets lucky and has that, 40-some-odd% chance to come up and it kills something that it has no business outspeeding with that surprise factor. But now Slowking-Galar, it doesn't have that same ability, so I'm kind of curious. It's just nasty plus 3 attacks, maybe something weird with like a berry, Trick Room. Could be interesting to see. Storm Zone is definitely the master of innovation though, so I'm sure that's going to work out. He also got a Hawlucha, which can do pretty well in this match with Toxic 6 any damage. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. Tala's team, it looks like it's pretty standard aside from the Scizor. We see a nice defensive backbone with Toxapex, Corviknight, Landorus T, and then double Dragon doing damage. 4D, we got Dragapult and Hydreigon, both dropping Dracos potentially, or dropping Darts and Dragapult's case, depending on the sets. I'm interested to see how this plays out as well. I quite like both teams. I really enjoy how they adapt to the metagame around them, and I just want to say, let's get into this game, because you already know it's going to be pretty chaotic. So right off the bat, we see Scizor lead for Tala, likely predicting the Ninetales Lola, which, yeah, that's a great play there, as Bullet Punch can take it out. Basing the Garchomp as Storm Zone goes for the Bullet Punch, and that does 37, which already reveals it's actually a more offensive Scizor, which is pretty cool. Now, he only really needs Scizor for Curum defensively in this team, as Rillaboom is covered pretty decently by things like the Dragon type's Revenge Killing and Corviknight there. And also, I don't think Scizor has a ton of defensive value besides those Pokemon. It's got a pretty limited scope. So using it offensively here is really interesting for Tala. But yeah, that Bullet Punch damage is really massive. Well, yeah, so 37% there, but he's got to be scared up by a fire move. So he goes for the Stone Edge, predicting a switch. Perhaps not to the Corviknight, as that could have been a fire move. Again, perhaps maybe predicting mid-round of something like the Hydreigon or the Dragapult. And he goes for the Stone Edge and Slide Forward, but Tala goes to the Corviknight, maybe saying, okay, maybe I respect the fire move, but I know Corviknight can live one, and if he goes for Rocks or he goes for Swords Dance, then I'll be better off there. So yeah, it's a bit of a mid-round from Tala is what I'd say. I guess that's the best way to put it. Sorry. But looking at this position here, 28% is not a lot of damage. I feel like Storm Zone really isn't getting a ton of mileage out of this Garchomp, and you might argue, okay, that's not a big deal, as he has other things like Slowking and Rillaboom to pressure Toxapex, and there's no Heatran or Zero Aura on this side, so he could kind of be okay regardless, but I feel like that definitely puts him a step behind already, and we're only a couple of turns into this game, so yeah, interested to see how that'll go, but taking a health, so he's down below half. He goes for the Stone Edge again, and I don't understand this play. I feel like he had to be Rocks. He should have went for it, or went for a Swords Dance to predict the Roost. So I'm not a huge fan of that play. I know he's down to 25 here, and this he goes for a Stone Edge again, and that insult to injury. He misses the third one. While he does get some nice rough skin damage off on the Corviknight, the Garchomp's now all the way down to 4%, and Scizor is going to take it out. And while Scizor is down below 2/3 health at 63, and Corviknight is at 82, that's really not a lot of mileage out of the Garchomp there. You basically wasted Garchomp. You're not going to have Rocks up for the entirety of the game. And you gotta wonder if you could have potentially got more mileage out of that. But either way, Scizor is actually the revenge killer of the opposing Scizor, and looking at this matchup makes a lot of sense. Scizor does well against Rillaboom, Scizor does well against Ninetales Alola. Scizor can at least U-turn or knock off the Slowking-Galar, and who knows if it's Flamethrower. On Nasty Plot 3 attacks, they don't really run Flamethrower very often, they run Focus Blast, so I can get Heatran. And you can't go Hawlucha without the terrain up, so yeah, I mean, you don't really have to play. You have to go Scizor there into the Scizor, and that highlights a really good part of Talo's matchup in that Scizor, plus the fact that he's got like something like Haze Dragapult, Haze and Dragapult in his team, makes him pretty well prepared for hyper offensive teams. It definitely seemed like he was kind of conscious of this archetype going into it, and that definitely deserves major props for Tala, but it's okay. Storm Zone knows he can make the best out of any bad situation, so he goes for the Swords Dance here as the Landorus T comes in. Ninetales is going to be baited in now as he doesn't want to take a strong Earthquake, and that one is going to be very strong, doing 77%. And to add insult to injury for Storm Zone, while he goes through the Veil, Tala stays in, knowing he's not going to go for a Freeze Dry into the Scizor potentially, and gets Rocks up. So now Ninetales Alola is basically dead. This is essentially a 6-4 game in favor of Tala because he made that risk knowing he wouldn't Freeze Dry, and that's just a fantastic Stealth Rock play there. Landorus T was quite useful as a pivot in this matchup, and that makes it so that Tala's lead, I wouldn't say it's like insurmountable at this point, but it absolutely is something that's worth noting at now. So now you're probably going to see just a smooth as Freeze Dry here, trying to catch the Landorus T, but unfortunately Tala stays ahead of the curve once more, getting that Freeze Dry off, and the Corviknight only doing 23%. And now, since he's dead to Rocks, all he can do is just go for another as Corviknight roosts off there. And he's wasting his Veil turns, and it looks as if Storm Zone really can't gain his footing in this game. He goes into Scizor here, which may be able to take advantage of the Veil, but U-turn is going to make it so that Tala is really able to position himself well, bringing the Landorus T there. And it looks like Scizor really can't do much, as it's going to be taking 27% from that, and it's only at +1 there. Now he goes for another Swords Dance here, and now this is interesting because he's at +3 plus Life Orb. There's a chance Bullet Punch may be able to kill this Landorus T, but if you Bullet Punch and your Life Orb into something like the Corviknight, you got or Rocky Helmet Toxapex, then you're really only getting off one more hit potentially, and that's not great, especially because then you leave the Landorus alive and the Scizor alive, and those are the Pokemon you want out of the way for things like Hawlucha and Rillaboom. So you're not really making the progress you need. You're making progress, but you're not killing the things you need, because the thing is that in this matchup, Tala has some things that can serve multiple purposes, so you need to get them out of the way so that they can't serve those purposes, so that all of a sudden the check to say Rillaboom or Hawlucha is no longer in play. And that would be a major opening for Storm Zone there, but I don't think he's going to be able to get that mileage out of Scizor now, so I almost wonder if he was better off attacking outright and not, or switching outright, but I digress. And now here's a really bizarre turn. So we see here another Earthquake, and it gets a Mineral. Scizor lives it, and he goes for a Psycho Cut. Doesn't go for the Bullet Punch, perhaps predicting the Toxapex switch, and I don't know about that. See, I feel as if Toxapex was needed for the Hawlucha, but that also plays into what I was saying before. Storm Zone has to make progress against something that Tala needs, otherwise he's not going to be able to win because there's going to be no win path. So maybe he was saying, okay, I'm going to play into the choke there, and knowing that worst case scenario, there's a chance I live regardless and can get a lot of damage off. So I respect the play from Storm Zone. Personally, I would have Bullet Punched, but Psycho Cut definitely did a lot of damage nonetheless, done this 84%, and that's going to leave the Landorus too low. But again, now it's essentially a 6-3 game. But the Landorus is weakened. Rillaboom's going to be able to come in here now, posing his threat as a revenge killer, but Corviknight and Scizor are both resisted, so he's got to be careful there. He goes for U-turn, knowing that is the case, and he brings in a Hawlucha. Hawlucha coming in here now against Corviknight is also pretty big, as Corviknight had an opportunity to Brave Bird before, and he didn't actually go for it. Now, you could argue he still wouldn't have went for it. It's really hard to say. It depends on the remainder of how Tala kind of evaluated the situation, but I think at this point, Storm Zone with +1 defense and Veil up, although Veil's expiring, unfortunately, kind of has to go for broke and say, okay, I need this not to be Brave Bird or Bulk Up plus Brave Bird, as then it's just sad day, sad reacts only for Storm Zone, so he kind of has to go for it and risk it here, knowing that maybe Tala won't have Brave Bird, maybe he'll go to Toxapex and he could get a crit off it, or if he's taunt, he could taunt it, or, you know, who knows, maybe it's specially defensive, it takes a lot of damage, so we'll have to wait and see. So I imagine the play here for Storm Zone is to Swords Dance, and if Kyle has Brave Bird, he goes for it, but he goes U-turn, revealing he's not Brave Bird, don't like it. He goes Pex here. Now, is there a way it's going to be taunt? It is taunt. Taunt on the Haze. Wait up. We see 70% damage there. Scald, is it going to burn? No burn, so wait a minute. All of a sudden now, this Hawlucha is at +2 attack. It kills the Pex. After a generator, it's a roll, but you get an Intimidate on a generator. So if you get Intimidate, then Regenerator, then you all of a sudden you could get another Scald off or Force a Taunt, 50-50 between those two. And if you get it right, you get 2 Scalds off, you get a Haze off, then you mitigate the threat. So that puts especially a lot of odds in favor of Tala, because even if for some reason you get 2 Scalds off and neither burns, which means 3 Scalds don't burn, then you're in Scissor or Bullet Punch range as well. So the Holuche isn't winning the game outright if you're able to do that. But Storm Zone could see this and say, okay, I think he's going to fight a Landorus T. So what if I go for another Swords Dance so I could kill him even after Regenerator? And I think that's the play you have to make, because again, if you're Storm Zone, you're basically down 6-3 at this point. You're in a dire situation, and you haven't killed the things you need for your win conditions to really be active, so you kind of have to make win conditions out of your own aggressive play. And this is another really great play by Storm Zone, in my opinion. He goes for the Swords Dance on the Switch Landorus T. Yes, spoiler alert, whoop-de-doo. And that puts him in a really promising position. All of a sudden, he's got +3 attack. Now, Tala has to switch out here, foddering something else. And ultimately, I actually think that this might not have been the best play of Acrobatics there, because we saw that the Landorus T was leftover Stealth Rock, Earthquake, and you know that you're Taunt. So, in my opinion there, Storm Zone could have actually went for another Swords Dance. Now, I know that risks him going for Toxic, but if he goes Toxic on the Taunt, then Swords Dance the next turn, that is equally bad, because all you're doing is getting U-turn damage off, and he's not in Scissor range yet. So, in my opinion, I would have went for another Swords Dance there, but there are some valid concerns there. He could be scared of Toxic. Again, as I said, he could be scared of Stone Edge, which would put you in Bullet Punch range potentially, and so on and so forth. So, I get why Acrobatics, but I think from this position, it doesn't really make it super clear that he has a win path yet either, just because Scissor is limiting the back, and given that it's probably Metal Coat or even Choice Band, although I'm imagining Metal Coat given the damage before, or like Max Adamant at least, it's going to be still doing like 35-40% potentially against this, so you can't really take another Scald. And if Tala's able to get another Scald off, especially if it burns, then it looks like it's probably going to be lights out for Storm Zone. So he goes Landorus T, gets to Intimidate, and now there's another opportunity to go for the same, but he goes Acrobatics here. Again, I understand it, but I feel like he couldn't afford to do that. It does force, again, another fodder that actually can regenerate to full health. I get it, but I feel like it could have been a higher attack at this point, but I digress. We see an Acrobatic for 68, so it would have lived regardless. It wouldn't have lived regardless, actually, because it's below Regenerator health, as you see there. But then Scald does 24, but it gets a burn. So even if 36% wasn't in range for Bullet Punch, which, I don't know, maybe it's a roll, maybe it doesn't kill, I'm not sure. That's still pretty huge there. He gets the burn, and now, all of a sudden, and yeah, you can't really complain here if you're Storm Zone, because that was the second Scald it took. But all of a sudden now, this can't actually kill the Toxpex here, so he probably has to taunt here, and then just settle for leaving it weakened. So at this point, there's no really policy for Storm Zone to win the game, if you will, because of how weakened the Lucha was, and there goes that. So he brings in the Slowking-Galar, just kind of his last-ditch effort, but it turns out that there was a policy. In fact, there was a weakness policy. My man gets it knocked off. Weakness policy activates and clicks Trick Room, and we're all like, oh shit, what the fuck just happened? Has Storm Zone done it again? But wait up, hold the phone. It's not quite over yet. So he has 4 turns of Trick Room, because you see here, 4 turns of Trick Room to take out Corviknight, to take out Scizor, and to take out Toxpex. Now, judging by the normal sets of Nasty Plot Slowking-Galar, which are Nasty Plot, Psych Shock, usually sometimes Psychic, Sludge Bomb, because you need the stabs, you know that, and also if you don't run one of those, then you're kind of walled by Fairy types, or you're kind of walled by Toxpex, and so on and so forth. But, the last move tends to be Focus Blast, because that hits Ferrothorn, and that hits Steel types, but it hits Heatran, because if you run Flamethrower, then you're just hard-rolled by Heatran. And that's a problem, especially when you have a Scizor, and you have a Rillaboom, and you have a Ninetales Lolo on your team. So you imagine it's definitely Focus Blast. And it has to be something that hit Toxpex, right? Especially on this team, so it's probably Psychic. Now, in theory, it could drop Sludge Bomb. While that does great damage against Fairy types, you know, it's not enough to really, it's not enough to deter you from, like, considering other options. Because you want to have something like Scald or Ice Beam hit ground types, like Garchomp and Landorus T, and so on and so forth. So that makes some sense, especially because you also get the one-shot on Hydreigon +2 without risking Focus Miss, and you do a lot more at Dragapult to +0. So I get other options here. So all of a sudden, I'm like thinking through here, and you know, I'm thinking that with the combination of Scizor demolishing Fairy types and Rillaboom matching up pretty well against most Fairy types as well, I'm actually thinking that maybe he could have a different move. But regardless, if he has any move at +2 that is not Psychic, that kills a 19% Toxpex, that does more than Psychic to Corviknight and Scizor, you gotta go for it here, right? And he goes for the Psychic here, which means that Corviknight is able to tank 2 of those. He's got to go for the Focus Blast here now. And it turns out he had Ice Beam. And this, in my opinion, means that last turn was unfortunately a misplay from Storm Zone. Because +2 Ice Beam always kills packs, you gotta assume. It's a max special attack Ice Beam at +2, so that neutralizes the resistance. So a neutral Ice Beam from a max special attack Slowking-Galar is going to do it 19%. So yeah, and then Ice Beam with 2 kill the Corviknight. So that saves you a turn. But now, after Psychic, Ice Beam just barely doesn't kill and gets a Roost off, and losing that turn is crucial. And now, all of a sudden, Storm Zone has one more chance. He goes Focus Blast, but he doesn't connect. No! It goes to the left. My goodness gracious. That is horrible. Would he have had enough turns? I think so, yeah. I think he still would have had it there, but it would have been more up to interpretation. But yeah, that's going to be a missed attack there. And at this point, it looks as if, while Focus Blast is going to connect and do a nice 53%, U-Turn as Trick Room runs out. It's going to let the Scizor come in here, and Knockoff can easily take out that Slowking-Galar, giving him the Rillaboom. And from there, with that being basically the last Pokemon, while Bullet Punch doesn't take it out, Knockoff can take up the Scizor, but unfortunately, that is not going to be enough with the Corviknight and the Toxic's alive. A Critical Hit would have done it. He actually should have switched out here for a Regenerator to avoid a Critical Hit killing. That was a misplay on Tala's end. But unfortunately, no such luck there. He recovers that off, and that's the game. I guess he could have lived with I don't think Corviknight lived now. So yeah, I think he really should have switched it. But regardless, that'll do it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I see there you get less fire on the last Pokemon, but Woodhammer can't kill the Corviknight as it's 4 times resisted, and that's that. Alright guys, have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye.